Hey guys, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to a reading wrap up. So today we're gonna chat about the books that I read in March and April because I never made a March wrap up. I didn't forget, it was kind of intentional. Most of the books that I read in March I talked about in one video or another. So I am gonna be kind of brief on some of the books today just because I've talked about them at length in other videos. If that's the case, I'll have the video linked down below and I'll put it up in a card while I'm talking about that particular book. We have 10 books to talk about today. I'll also have all of the books that I talk about linked down below in the description if you want to go learn some more about them. So let's get straight into it. The first book I have to talk about is Love Bites by Lindsay Sands. This is the second book in the Argenau vampire series and you will see a trend in this video. I've read a lot of this series lately. The first book was called A Quick Bite and I've been listening to these audiobooks on Scribd, and if you're looking for like trashy adult paranormal romance, would highly recommend. I've been having a very fun time with these audiobooks. So Love Bites is the second book and we're following Rachel and Etienne. And so basically the way the series works is we're following a new couple with every book, but one member of that couple is a part of this Argenau family and they're all vampires. And so in the second book, the character Rachel works the night shift in a morgue, and so she meets Etienne the vampire because he shows up in her morgue twice. This series, I'm so happy that I gave it a chance. It's kind of an older series and it's super long, like over 20 plus books long. And I'm so glad that I gave it a chance because it's exactly the type of paranormal romance that I was looking for. The writing style is so funny. It's very self-aware. It's making fun of itself. It's not taking itself too seriously. And like I genuinely am laughing out loud while I'm listening to these audiobooks, both because the things happening in the book is ridiculous, but also I just love Lindsay Sands' writing style. Like she's so funny. Also in like a subtle way too. I think she does a really good job with the subtle humor. I really enjoy this take on vampires. Basically, they're this really wealthy family that's kind of turned into an empire in the vampire world. Like they own these companies that produce synthetic blood and things like that, and the mom of this family is basically playing matchmaker and going through each one of her children trying to find a match for them. I was hesitant going into the second book because I knew it was following a new couple, and I tend to get really attached to main characters, so I don't really like when series jump to these side characters. I'm never as invested, but that has not been the case with this series whatsoever. I've gotten completely on board with every single one of these couples. So yeah, overall these have just been a really fun time, really trashy, very steamy, just very fast and easy to read. I would really recommend listening to the audiobooks. They've been a fun time. The second book that I read in March was Sacrifice Me by Sarah Cannon. Now this book I talked about in my like reading author tubers vlog. If you missed that reading vlog, I have it linked down below. I talked about 3 books in that video. This book I actually ended up DNFing halfway through. And it's just come to my attention recently that people rate books that they DNF, and that concept is wild to me. Like I'll mark it as DNF on Goodreads or whatever, but I never give it a rating. I'm just curious, if you guys DNF books, do you rate them? I made it halfway through this book, but I feel like I can't rate it because I didn't finish it. Anyway, Sacrifice Me by Sarah Cannon. It's the first book in a new adult urban fantasy paranormal series, and I had really high hopes going into this one. It was supposed to have all kinds of supernatural creatures in it, and I kind of already knew what to expect from this world because it's sort of a companion series to her Shadow Demon saga, which is a young adult series. And so I was excited for this one because it was new adult, so I was hoping it would read older. We're following our main character Frankie. Her mother disappeared when she turned 18, and so 3 years later she's turning 21. She gets this letter in the mail calling her the nickname that her mom used to use for her, but she hasn't heard from or seen her mom in 3 years. And basically is an invitation to go to a club that doesn't exist. This book started off really strong for me. I had really high hopes for it, but as I got further into it, I just had so many issues with it and I just personally wasn't enjoying it. I don't think it's a bad book, and I really like the world that these books are set in. The main problem that I had with it and why I ended up DNFing it was it read very young to me, and I found the relationship to be very insta-lovey and I couldn't really get behind it. But it wasn't awful or anything by any means. This one just wasn't for me. The book that I read after that was also in that reading author tubers vlog, was The Stars We Steal by Alexa Dunn, and I ended up really enjoying this one. This is a young adult sci-fi retelling of Persuasion. So basically we're following our main character in the middle of this like bachelorette-esque process where all of the eligible basically nobility in space are being paired off to find someone to marry, and our main character Leo, her father is really pushing for her to find a wealthy man because her family is struggling financially. And this plan Leo wants absolutely no part of, especially when her ex appears, an ex that she used to be engaged to, and there are clearly some hard feelings still there. I really enjoyed this one. I actually have never read Persuasion. I realized that while I was reading this book. I think this was really fun. Definitely go into this expecting like a soapy romance. It's definitely more focused on the characters and the relationships more so than the sci-fi aspect, and that's personally how I prefer my sci-fi, so I was fine with it. This is one of those books where I was just incredibly frustrated reading the majority of it on the character's behalf, but overall at the end I ended up really enjoying it, and I don't think my frustration was like an issue with the book. It was just like a frustrating situation, and I was very angry for the main character. But yeah, overall this one ended up exceeding my expectations. I had a really fun time with it. I think I read it in like 2 days. Would recommend. You may have noticed I'm not really giving star ratings to these books. I know a lot of booktubers have started going this way where they don't rate books, and there've been plenty of videos of people posting discussions on whether they should or not and their reasoning, and frankly I don't think any of you care what my reasoning is. If you do, let me know, but I've just decided that at least right now, I just have no desire to give star ratings to books, and I don't find it helpful for me. I actually kind of find it limiting, so it's just not, I just like don't want to. So then the next book that I had to talk about is the final book that I had in that reading author tubers video, which was Song of the Dryad by Natalia Lee. This is a young adult, like cozy contemporary fantasy with fairies. Basically our main character Charlotte can see fairies, but she's been trying to convince herself that she doesn't see them her whole life because she had like a really scary encounter when she was younger. But then one day her mother goes missing, and she's the only person who can save her because she's the only person who knows what really happened to her. It was kind of like a quest story. Yeah, it was very cute. It had like a very small town cozy feel for it. I liked our main character Charlotte. There's a cute like friendship relationship in there. My main issue with this book was just that it felt like it was sort of lacking agency. Like our main character wasn't making decisions to push the plot forward. It was like things were happening to her or things were falling into her lap. So it just felt like a really slow moving book. And given the situation that her mother is missing, the main character just like didn't seem worried about it. Like there was no like high stakes or sense of urgency that I got from it, despite it being like a serious situation. But overall I really enjoyed reading this one. I thought it was really cute. The story itself and also the writing style is just very cozy and easy to read. It just took me a while to get through this one. This is 100% the kind of book that I would recommend like curling up with in front of the fire or something. It was a good time. If you're familiar with the Spiderwick Chronicles, this totally gave off those kind of vibes. I think you'll really enjoy this one. After that, our book club pick for March was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I know I said I'm not giving star ratings, but this one would be a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book. There's a spoilery reading vlog for it on my Patreon page. If you didn't know, I run a book club over on Patreon where we basically buddy read a book together every month. I'll have the link down below if you want to join us next month. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I had so much fun with this one. Also, I was filming like a 24-hour reading vlog at the time, so I'll have that link down below. So basically this book is following our main character Pip, and she's a senior in high school and she's trying to do this big project where she investigates this cold case murder that happened in her small town like 5 years ago. Basically the pretty and popular girl Andy Bell, she went missing. No one ever found her body, but everyone basically concluded that her boyfriend Sal did it, and then he went on to kill himself, and Pip does not think that's what happened and she wants to investigate this. And as she gets into investigating it, as you know with the thrillers, some notes and such start showing up telling her to stop digging. I tried so hard to call what the twist was gonna be and what the end was gonna be, and I didn't get it. I'm usually very good at calling twists and thrillers, and I couldn't get it. And that's the one thing that everyone told me before I wrote this book was you're never gonna guess the ending, and they were right. I tried. Despite my best attempts, I couldn't guess the ending. This one was really fun. I listened to the audiobook, would wholeheartedly recommend the audiobook because it's the kind that has like sound effects and stuff, because this book is sort of multimedia formatting. Like she has her reports for school for this project in there, and she has these interviews and voice memos, so it sounds like they're on the phone and stuff. So it's just got a lot of cool effects in there, and I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook. This is something that I read within 24 hours. I had so much fun with it. I'm so glad I picked it up. I've had such a poor track record with young adult thrillers. I love adult thrillers, but I can name on like one finger the amount of YA thrillers that I've enjoyed, and this one gave me hope that maybe I would like some more YA thrillers. This one was so good. I loved our main character Pip. The ending was crazy. It takes you on like so many twists that like you think you have it figured out, and then it goes this way, and then it goes this way, and then it goes this way. It was so much fun. I had so much fun reading this book. Would highly recommend. And then the last book that I finished in March before we get on to April was Single White Vampire, and this is the 3rd book in that Arjuna Vampire series. This one is my favorite in the series, I think. This one is following Luke and Kate. So Luke is the vampire in the family, and he is a writer who's basically decided to become a hermit. He never leaves his house, doesn't want to interact with people. He's like 600 years old and he's so freaking over everything, and he just wants to write and never deal with people. and I should not relate to that. As a 23-year-old, like, that should not be like my spirit animal, but it is. And so Kate comes into his life because she's his new editor. And it's funny because the books he writes are romance books. He's basically writing the previous books that you've read because he's been writing the love stories of his family. And basically Kate is trying to convince him to go on a book tour and go to a book convention, and it's so freaking cute. Especially, obviously, if you're reading it, you like books. Going to like a book convention with him and hearing about him being an author and all of his crazy fans and everything. I just think that world is just really fun to read about. I think this one is by far the funniest in the series. I was laughing throughout this book. I loved Luke's character. The comedy in this one was just A+. I loved this one. So now moving on to the books that I read in April. I started off the month with The King of Crows by Libba Bray. I have a reading vlog for this one as well. I'll have a link down below. The King of Crows is the final book in the Diviners series, and the Diviners is one of my favorite series. I gushed about it pretty much all last year, and so this was one of my most highly anticipated releases of this year, and I was so disappointed, but also like not surprised that I was disappointed. Especially if you've seen my recent tier ranking video, I have a trend of never liking the last book in a series. I never do. I'm hard to please, apparently. Nothing is satisfying. I don't ever like the last book in a series, unless it's Clockwork Princess. And so this one, I went in with such high expectations because I loved this series so much, and it was just, it's my least favorite in the series. It was a disappointing ending. I'm still glad that I read it. I'm still glad that I finished the series, but it definitely wasn't satisfying for me. And from what I've seen of other reviews, I'm not totally in the minority there. A lot of people have been disappointed with this book. It's really long. I listened to the audiobook and it was like a 22-hour long audiobook, and I just feel like nothing happened in it until the last like 100 pages. It's sort of like a travel book where the characters are traveling here and then traveling here. It just felt like such like a meandering, slow story, and nothing happened. Like, I literally just read this book and I could not tell you what happened aside from the ending. And given how much I really loved the second and the third books in the series, and I still have like really strong, vivid memories of a couple of key points in those books, and I just felt like this one didn't stand up to those. Like, it didn't have any crazy surprising moments. So yeah, overall I just found this one really underwhelming, but I would still highly recommend this series. The first 3 books I love, specifically books 2 and 3. We're just gonna pretend this last one isn't a part of the series. The next book I read in April was in that same reading vlog as The King of Crows, and that was Priest by Sierra Simone. This book was actually recommended to me by a lot of you guys, so you are to blame. I'm just kidding. I didn't hate this book. This is a romance novel, if you couldn't tell. And I've been wanting to try another Sierra Simone book for a while because I read 2 of her books last year, A Lesson in Thorns and A Feast of Sparks. And I loved A Lesson in Thorns and I hated A Feast of Sparks, so I needed like a tiebreaker. So I don't know why I thought Priest was the way to go, but we went there. So basically our main character is a priest. I'm trying to remember his name. It's already gone. And I'm trying to remember the girl's name too. It was a weird name. We'll look it up. But basically this girl moves to a small town and she like lives right across the street from this church. She's not Catholic, but she goes in there because she's done something terrible, and she goes in to do confession with this priest. And within the first scene, he's like getting a boner just from her voice when she's doing her confession, which is kind of weird. And basically this book is just them having sex a million times in the middle of a church. And the thing that bothered me the most was I was so anxious reading these sex scenes that someone was gonna walk in on them in the middle of this church. My anxiety was at new heights the entire time. Tyler is the priest's name. The girl's name's not even in the blurb. This is not helpful. Poppy. Her name is Poppy. So basically Poppy comes from like a waspy, super wealthy family. She's tried to break away from that. She doesn't like what they stand for, so she became a stripper, but like an elite stripper at like a fancy strip club. It's only for super rich people. I don't know. Tyler has this tragic past where his older sister committed suicide because she was molested by their childhood priest. So then he became a priest. The logic there just like didn't really line up for me. He wanted to like right the wrongs of what had happened to his sister and help improve the church after that past sin. I don't know. To me, that's like just not a natural path that you would take, is, oh, this priest is like essentially responsible for my sister's suicide, so I will become a priest now. I could more understand his family's reaction. Like, none of them wanted anything to do with the church and they were actually like super mad when he became a priest. So anyway, this book is super, super smutty. I expected that because it's a romance novel, and I expected it because it's Sierra Simone, but like the level of smut I wasn't prepared for. Like, to the point where I felt like it was overkill. I I felt like there wasn't enough plot. There weren't enough scenes that weren't sex scenes to break it up or to actually develop this relationship between the characters. The only time you're ever gonna see them in the same scene is when they're having sex. And then you're told later on that like the relationship is developed or that they treat each other so differently when they're not having sex, but you never see that. Like you're literally only watching them have sex in the church, like on a piano with the doors unlocked. I cannot emphasize enough how much it stressed me out. So I'll help you out now if you're gonna read the book. No one ever walks in on them, so you can just not worry the way that I had to worry. So yeah, overall this wasn't the worst book in the world. I started off kind of enjoying it, and then the further we got, the less pleased I was. I just wanted more character development. I wanted more build up. We jumped straight into the sex really fast, and I personally really like slow burn. I like the banter. I like the sexual tension, and I feel like we get none of that except in the first chapter where he's already like getting turned on from hearing her voice. I think I was particularly disappointed in the characterization in this book just because one of my favorite things about A Lesson in Thorns was the characters. So I know she wrote Priest first, so she's clearly improved since then. So I would definitely be open to reading her later books, and I really like her writing style. I think she's a great writer. I mentioned that in the last two books of hers that I read, even the one that I didn't like. I really like her writing style. I think she's a really strong writer. This one wasn't terrible, and it was an experience, so I'm not even mad that I read it, but it was an experience. We'll just leave it at that. The book that I read after that was Her Pretty Face by Robin Harding. This was our book club pick for April, so there's a spoilery reading vlog for it on my Patreon page. This is an adult thriller. I wanted to read this one because I read Robin Harding's book The Arrangement last year, and it was like one of my favorite books that I read last year. It was so much fun, and so I went into Her Pretty Face knowing literally nothing about the plot, just recognizing the author and knowing that it was a thriller. And this book was very dark to me, just based on the things that I find really upsetting to read about, to the point where I almost set it down because it was upsetting me so much. So just be aware of that if you want to read this book. The book is kind of like ambiguous with the timelines at first, so I'm trying to describe it in a way that's not going to spoil anything. I personally didn't read the blurb going into the book, and I kind of recommend doing that because I feel like part of the blurb kind of spoils one of the fun things about the book. So we're following two women. They're best friends, they have like a bromance kind of going on, and they both have young children. And we're jumping back and forth between that storyline, and we're also hearing from this guy, DJ, whose older sister was murdered when she was 15 years old. And this is the thing that was really disturbing to me, is hearing about what happened to his sister. Basically, this couple abducted her and they raped and tortured and degraded and murdered her, like in a really horrific way. And so hearing about that was just like really troubling to me. I really didn't like that. And so you know that these two stories are connected in some way. So I was very nervous. As a thriller, it's definitely not my favorite. I liked The Arrangement more. If you're gonna read one of her books, I would recommend starting with The Arrangement. This book was fine. I didn't hate it. I had high expectations that weren't met. I feel like it was missing something towards the end. Like I was waiting for some huge twist and there wasn't a whole lot of payoff with the end of the book. There are things that I like about it. I really like her writing style. The characters were interesting. If you're interested in psychology and sociopaths, you might find this interesting. But overall, I was stressed out, troubled, and disturbed reading this book. And then I was left unsatisfied at the end because there wasn't really much of an ending. There was an ending, but there wasn't much of like a twist, big climax at the end, you know? So yeah, I don't really know how to properly describe this book other than it just being kind of a weird experience. I think I would still tentatively recommend it. I just don't think it's the strongest thriller out there. It has an interesting premise and it has enough good things going for it that I would still recommend reading it, but I would definitely recommend reading her book The Arrangement over this one. And then the final book that I have to talk about is Tall, Dark, and Hungry, which is the fourth book in the Arsenault Vampire series. This one took me a freaking month to finish, and it's not a long book, and I was listening to it on an audiobook. This is by far my least favorite one in the series so far, and it's made me want to take a break and not pick up the fifth book. It's not terrible by any means. It's just, I don't know if maybe I'm just kind of over the series by now, but I found this story to be the least interesting. We're following Bastian and Terry. So basically, Kate and Luke from the previous book are getting married, and so Bastian and Terry are their best man and maid of honor, and so they're basically trying to save the wedding as everything goes wrong. And if you've been on this channel for a while, you know I hate everything goes wrong plots. They stress me out, they're not fun for me to read, I hate them, they're frustrating, like they make me actively angry. I can't handle them, I hate plots like that. And so that is one thing that was working against it. And I'm also just like not super into like wedding stuff, which is funny because I used to work for a bridal magazine, but like I just don't find that kind of stuff really interesting. And so them like sitting around and trying the catering and making these paper flowers and like I just don't care. So the characters were cute, the relationship was cute, the writing style was still funny. This is just definitely my least favorite one based on my own personal preferences because I didn't like the everything goes wrong plot, and I didn't really care for hearing about getting prepared for a wedding. So I don't know. I don't even know what the 5th book is about. I don't even know which characters it follows. So it could be like much better than the 4th one. I don't know. But coming out of the 3rd one, which is my favorite in the series, to this one was definitely my least favorite, and it just wasn't my jam. So yeah, those are all of the books that I've read in the past 2 months. Honestly, 10 books in 2 months I'm really happy with, considering I've been really busy the past 2 months working. I wrote my own book, I've been editing a different book, I've had a lot of editing clients lately. So reading for fun just hasn't been as much of a priority, but I would love to hear down below in the comments about some books that you've been reading lately, especially if you have some 5-star reads. I'll have all of the videos that I talked about today up in the cards and linked down below in the description, as well as links to all of these books if you want to go grab one or just learn some more about it. And there's a ton of other stuff down below in the description if you're interested. I have got links to all of my social medias if you want to come follow me elsewhere. You can pre-order my book that's coming out in June, join my book club, check out my freelance editing services, all of that good stuff. But other than that, I think this video is extremely long, so I will just see you in my next one very, very soon. Bye.
So hit me. So hit me. So hit me. First a confession. With you, I feel a connection. With